Alright, welcome to Chapter 18's video lecture. The first part of this video lecture is about solid waste management, and then we'll get into more similar stuff to the textbook. So in particular, waste reduction in Placer County. Waste prevention, known as source reduction, means changing habits to reduce the amount of trash created every day. So that's sort of that question that you're working on in your waste project about what habits have you changed. So think source reduction when you want to change a habit. If you're thinking about that, here are a few tips. You could trade books and magazines with friends and family instead of each of you buying your own. You could buy products made from recyclable and or recyclable materials, so glass, plastic jugs. You can buy products in bulk, and so then the packaging waste is less. You could use products in refillable containers. You could use reusable shopping bags instead of disposable paper or plastic bags. You could compost your organic waste and then turn it into awesome, nutritious soil. And you could also use a reusable cup, both for water and for coffees. If you want to eliminate your unwanted mail, you can go to this, website, and that will help you, or this address. Okay, with the current available space and throughout the recovery efforts of the MRF, which is the Materials Recovery Facility, the landfill will be available to accept waste into the 21st century, which is awesome. Before placing garbage into the landfill, there's a liner system that's installed to prevent contamination of the underlying ground soils. So think of a big hole, and then before we let anything go in that big hole, we're going to put this liner in so that nothing can seep out. These liners typically consist of clay, plastic membrane, and a liquid drainage and collection system, so it's made up of 3 parts. In addition, as garbage is placed in, it's compacted and the maximum amount of trash that can be placed in the landfill is achieved. Alternative daily cover is placed each day over the exposed landfill. This cover, a tarp, helps minimize the odors from the landfill and prevents birds, rodents, insects from being attracted to the garbage. So as the garbage is decomposing in the landfill, it produces methane gas. Methane is not only explosive, but it's also a greenhouse gas. So the MRF collects the gas from the landfill and reduces the hazardous waste associated with the gas. And a portion of this gas is then used to run an internal combustion engine that will generate 1.2 megawatt hours of electricity, which is enough to roughly generate 1,000 homes. When the landfill reaches maximum capacity, it will be capped, and to be capped, we put a final layer of soil over it. But this cap prevents liquids from coming into contact with the garbage, and the cap will include a layer of soil that will support native grasses and helping close the landfill blend with the natural surroundings. The most common problem with landfills are contamination of groundwater. Most common problem. So when you put a landfill on top of the hill, most likely the groundwater will be contaminated at some point. Another common problem is used oil, and so when you get an oil change done on your car, that used oil needs to go somewhere. So used oil is a toxic substance that is improperly disposed of, can be environmentally hazardous. 1 gallon of oil, the size of a typical oil change, can contaminate 1 million gallons of water. That's why we do not dump our oil down the drain. Approximately 10% of people who change their oil return their used oil. So what's happening to that 90%? People are dumping it on their land and dumping it in the water. So please don't do that. If you want to look up specific sites, you can go to 1-800-CLEANUP. But I know from experience that any AutoZone location will collect oil and take it from you. So please, if you do your own oil, go and recycle it. So one thing you could do is choose refined oil, re-refined oil. Excuse me. Many of the industries that use virgin oil also use recycled or re-refined oil. According to the American Petroleum Institute, the nearly 750 million gallons of used oil collected in the U.S. each year. 43 of this is used by asphalt plants, 12% is used to generate electricity, and 14 is re-refined to virgin conditions. The remainder is used for other industries such as steel and paper mills. Here are a few companies: Coca-Cola, United Parcel Service, California Highway Patrol, and the U.S. military, and NASCAR use re-refined oil in their vehicles. So if NASCAR does it, you can do it. So the next time you change your oil, try to choose re-refined. The Environmental Protection Agency reports that every year Americans who change their own oil throw away 120 million of recoverable motor oil by dumping it on the ground, pouring it down storm drains, and putting it in trash cans. Recycling this motor oil would save the United States 1.3 barrels of oil per day. Use an American resource reduces our dependency on foreign natural resources, and it takes 1 gallon of used oil compared to 42 gallons of crude oil to produce the same 2.5 quarts of oil. So please recycle your oil. Batteries, cell phones, and electronics. Some of you asked where you can go and recycle this. This is the address of where you can go. So this image is really trying to encourage you to buy rechargeable batteries instead of one-time single-use batteries. They are a lot more expensive, and yes, there is the charge of recycling them, but it doesn't, the cadmium doesn't potentially go in the landfill like when you throw away batteries. Never, please, never throw your batteries away. Please bring them to school. There's a collection site. I will take them from you, so please bring them. Or better yet, even buy rechargeable. So this slide sort of summarizes some of the points we've made up this far. So groundwater contamination, we want to avoid that. We want to recycle our oil, and by recycling our oil, we're creating American jobs. And we're also conserving energy because 3 times more energy is used to process crude oil than to re-refine it. So for Chapter 18, you need to know that there are waste disposal methods, that there are 5 of them. Landfilling is one way, and that tends to be 57% of how we dispose of our waste. Incineration, which is burning, is 16%. Composting greens, leaves, grass clippings. Source reduction, so just using less material. And then recycling makes up the last 22%. The lack of dumping space has become a problem in many large metropolitan areas. Communities are increasingly concerned about waste disposal costs, groundwater, air quality hazards, and aesthetics and smell. As we've heard a couple different times, in the mid-1950s, the disposable lifestyle was marketed as the waves of the future, and it was a way to reduce household duties. So as a result, we've seen a huge increase in the amount of throwaways. Convenience was sold to prosperous post-World War consumers. Convenience was quick change to necessity. TV dinners were first marketed in 1953, so before that point we never even had them. So the nature of the problem: garbage is municipal solid waste. In the U.S., volume has increased more than 50% since 1960. If you've never gone to the dump, you should go, because it is definitely interesting what is there and what's not. Developed countries have a higher standard of living and thus produce more waste. Traditional methods, dumping and burning, are no longer accepted in the U.S., so you can't just dump your stuff. You have to go to a landfill. So air pollution and toxic gas are consequences of burning and dumping. Currently, there's almost 57% of the U.S. municipal solid waste is deposited in landfills. The number of landfills are declining, so new landfills often resist due to public concerns. NIMBY is not in my backyard, over groundwater contamination, odors, and truck traffic. Due to tight anaerobic conditions, biological decay in modern landfills is retarded. So here are 2 approaches to a landfill. One, you just pile it up on the side of the street and you walk around it. Clearly this is a public hazard. And the other one is you just keep piling it up, and rodents and whatnot are going to come and make their homes in it. Both of these can contaminate water. So if you use the one on the left, the one on the right, you have to make sure you use the technique of tarping it every other day. Recycling benefits: resource conservation, pollution reduction. Crushed glass reduces energy required to manufacture new glass by 50%, so it's great to recycle glass. Here are the recycling rates and how much are being recycled. Automobile batteries are really, really high, but there's also a core fee for it, so people usually want to get it back. Steel cars and aluminum packaging quickly decreases. So putting that fee on something actually increases the consumer to return it and recycle it. So some concerns with recycling. Plastics are recyclable, but technology differs from plastic to plastic. Industry is researching new technologies all the time, and economics are a concern. Unless the demand for products that are recycled keeps pace with the growing supply of what is available, recycling programs will face an uncertain future. Long-term success of recycling programs is also tied to other economic incentives, such as taxing issues and the development of demand of products and manufactured from recycled materials. Currently in the U.S., it's still cheaper to use virgin materials than transport recycled materials. And as long as the National Forest keeps leasing its land for a really low price, it's going to hurt the need for recycled paper. Incineration. Incinerators drastically reduce the amount of municipal solid waste, up to 90% by volume and 75% by waste. Even with modern pollution control, small amount of pollutants still released into the environment. This ash is really, really toxic. You need to send to hazardous waste site, and it's super costly. The cost of new incinerators is a major problem facing communities. It costs $45 million to $350 million to build. So although you need less space, there's lots of problems. One great technique is composting, harnessing nature's decomposition to transform organic material into compost. By properly managing air and water, composting can transform a large quantity over a short period of time. You do need a 3-to-1 ratio of carbon to nitrogen in order for the compost to be successful. So here's source reduction again. Excuse me. Most fundamental method of reducing waste is to prevent it from being produced. Since the 2-liter soft drink bottle introduced in 1977, the weight has been reduced by 35%. As a result, this saves on natural resources, reduces waste, and reduces costs. You can look at these states that are participating in the bottle bill, the CRV fee. Oregon was the first state, and now I think we've grown the number of states that make you pay a 10-cent deposit on bottles. Recycling initiatives have grown rapidly in North America during the past several years. By 1999, 9,000 cities in the U.S. had implemented curbside recycling programs, and some of the states and local governments enacting bottle bills and container laws to force increased recycling. Prior to 1940, incineration was common in North America and Western Europe. Many incinerators were eliminated because of the aesthetic concerns. Currently, about 16% of municipal solid waste is incinerated. Derived heat often used for electrical generation, so that's a good thing from them. Okay, here's that landfill design. You do need to know this. It will be on your test, so please know it. But here's the liner down here, full of clay and other materials. And then the caps are on top once the landfill is done. Here we have a methane monitoring, so we can know if there's any methane getting into the water, as well as a groundwater monitoring well. There's the Sacramento Kiefer landfill. This serves 600,000 people. The energy plant from the waste produces enough energy for 8,000 homes. So much of the methane is wasted, unfortunately, and a permit process for the liquefaction of natural gas plant possibly in operation by 2005. It hasn't started yet. Do you need to change your oil? So there's been so many times we've heard, oh, change your miles, oil every 3,000 miles. Consumer Reports magazine, however, disagrees. After comparing engines of New York taxi cabs that had oil changes every 3,000 and those that had them every 6,000, they found that at 60,000 miles there was no benefit from changing the oil every 3,000 rather than every 6,000. They concluded modern motor oil need to be changed as often as it did before. More frequent oil changes won't hurt your car, but you could be spending money unnecessarily and adding to the nation's energy and oil disposal problems. If your driving falls into the normal service category, changing the oil every 7,500 miles should certainly provide adequate protection. You see the decline in the number of landfills that we've already talked about. Last but not least, landfilling. Municipal landfills, typically a depression in the permeable clay layer lined with impermeable membrane, traditionally have been primary method of waste disposal. They're cheap and convenient, roughly $400,000 for a new facility. Large landfills often employ methane, give off methane gas, and some cases methane collected and can be used for generate electricity.